Well, welcome to this study on the Book of Obadiah. Now, before we start, it's a good idea to know something about the location of the Kingdom of Edom. Now, on a biblical map, you will find the Kingdom of Israel, which will include Jerusalem, and then below it will be the Kingdom of Judah, and below that, at the bottom of the map, you should be able to find the Kingdom of Edom, a small kingdom geographically, but very influential. Now, the Kingdom of Edom was set in the mountains, accessed only by probing your way through slender mountain passages.
Well, hello. My name is Mike Davies, and we're going to look at a quick outline of the Book of Obadiah found in the Old Testament of the Bible. Now, there are 66 books in the Bible, 39 in the Old Testament and 27 in the New Testament. Now, Obadiah is the 31st book of the Old Testament and contains just 21 verses, making it the smallest book in the Old Testament. A book that enlightens us about judgment and what ensues when we don't deal with pride. Now, I love this little book as it has so much anticipation. And to start with, we need to think of ourselves in a movie scene like one of those found in an Indiana Jones film, probing our way through slender mountain passages, trying to find a hidden city created within the rocks and within the mountains. Well, with this thought of walking through Indiana Jones movies, it's a good place to start our consideration of the Book of Obadiah as we focus on the Kingdom of Edom. On an Old Testament map, you will find the Kingdom of Israel, which would include Jerusalem, the Kingdom of Judah below that, and at the very bottom of the map you will find the Kingdom of Edom. A very small kingdom geographically, but very influential. Now, in Old Testament times, Obadiah was a popular name, so we shouldn't jump to any conclusions by linking him with other references to other Obadiahs in the Old Testament. The book refers to the Kingdom of Israel and the Kingdom of Edom. Now, when the book was written, well, it's difficult to date, but most scholars dated around 580 BC all the way through to 890 BC. But that's not important for us today. If it were important, the exact date would have been mentioned by the writer. What is essential is that Obadiah receives a prophetic vision from the Lord. But in order for us to understand the vision and the book, we must go all the way back to the book of Genesis. Now, back in Genesis, Isaac had two sons, Jacob, whose descendants went on to become the Israelites, and Esau, whose descendants went on to become the Edomites. Now, in Genesis 36 verse 1, it reads, "Now this is the genealogy of Esau, who is Edom." This is also repeated in Genesis 36 from verse 8. So we know that the kingdom of Edom goes all the way back to Esau and the eldest son of Isaiah. So in Genesis we have two brothers. We have Jacob and we have Esau. Twin brothers who were the sons of Isaac and Rebekah. Well, we know that many twins are similar and some are even identical, but these two brothers were opposite. While still in the womb, the Lord spoke to Rebekah and said, "Two nations are in your womb. Two people shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the other shall serve the younger." Genesis 25, from verse 23. Now, Esau grew to be the outdoor type. He was tough and rugged, and Jacob was the indoor type, the complete opposite to his brother. However, Jacob had the spiritual discernment which Esau lacked. In Genesis 25 from verse 29, "Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, 'Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary.' Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, 'Sell me your birthright as of this day.' And Esau said, 'Look, I am about to die. So what is this birthright to me?' Then Jacob said, 'Swear to me of this day.' So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, and then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright." The one brother represented the flesh and the other the spirit. But if we jump ahead all the way to the New Testament, Paul the Apostle writes in Galatians 5 from verse 17, "For the flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh, and these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish. So let us also look at the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi. Malachi chapter 1 from verse 2. I have loved you, says the Lord. Yet you say, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, says the Lord? Yet Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated, and laid waste his mountains and his heritage for the jackals of the wilderness. Now remember that in the last days, and in the last book of the Old Testament, both boys became nations. Now God views them as nations. Esau, which is Edom, is a godless nation. It has turned his back on God. Edom had become a great and a strong kingdom, and Obadiah now steps onto the scene to say that they will be brought down. Verse 3 tells us that their great sin was pride. This pride had deluded them. In Proverbs chapter 6, we are told that God hates 6 things. Number 1 of this is pride. Pride, after all, was the sin of the devil. Let us remind ourselves of Isaiah 14 from verse 13. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will be like the Lord Most High. Pride is a state of the heart which declares the ability to live without God. Often people say, follow your heart. This is not always a good thing. It is best to follow where your spirit leads you, where the spirit takes you. The book of Obadiah, in it we see pride had elevated the kingdom of Edom. The kingdom based on the rock-hewn cities of Petra. It is still in existence today, but the kingdom does not exist. The region is still there. Edom, a kingdom that could not be easily defended, was eventually defeated. Near the start of Obadiah in verse 4, we have the reference to the eagle, the symbol of deity. Remember in Isaiah 14, the devil declares his throne will be above the stars of God. And in Obadiah verse 4, it reads, though you ascended as high as the eagle, and though you set your rest among the nations, from there I will bring you down, says the Lord. Now Esau, the twin brother, had children who had children, and many years down the line they mingle with other cultures, they marry, and so on, and they become the kingdom of Edom. But the root of Esau remained within that kingdom. In many ways, Edom was a kingdom that people just disregarded. How could you conquer it? It was difficult to get to. It was a wealthy and a prosperous kingdom. And Edom was well protected. So, let's just ignore it. But from verse 10 through to verse 14, we have a list of their wrongdoings. Now, pride was their main obstacle because this had not been dealt with, and it had led to other hindrances. Now, it's well worth pointing out that pride is an attitude. Psalm 137, verse 7. Remember, O Lord, against the sons of Edom, the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, to its very foundation. Edom, instead of helping Israel in its darkest hour, when the Babylonians came and destroyed it to the ground, they stood and they cheered. And we know that the Babylonians ultimately conquered and seized the kingdom of Edom. But while they were still strong, they applauded as Jerusalem and the Israelites were smashed. Now Obadiah verse 11. In that day you stood on the other side. In that day strangers carried captive his forces. When foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem, you were one of them. Instead of aiding those that they were related to, they went to the other side. At the end of verse 12 it reads, nor should you have rejoiced over the children of Israel. This is always an act that comes as a result of pride, rejoicing over someone else's ruin. Verse 13, you should not have entered the gate of my people. They not only applauded and rejoiced, they entered and looted what was left of the city. Verse 14, sadly, it gets worse. You should not have stood at the crossroads to cut off those among them who escaped, nor should you have delivered up those among them who remained in the day of distress. They betrayed their blood relatives. They assisted looting the city. Then they prevented those who ran for their lives from escaping. Well, God was aware of all of this, and their time was coming. It was a brief reward for Edom. Soon they too would be overcome by the Babylonians, and then later by the Maccabees, and finally destroyed by the Romans. In Matthew 7 verse 1 it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." These are wise words for all of us. The people of Edom were wiped out in the same way in which they watched the people of Jerusalem destroyed and then taken captive. Galatians 6 verse 7, "Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." God had judged Israel, but he never destroyed them. Now, Obadiah centers on the devastating power of pride. It reminds us of the consequences of living in a self-serving manner, of following through on our own feelings and our own desires without considering the impact on those around us. Let this be a warning to us all. Obadiah reminds us that we need to remain within God's authority and God's direction. I hope that this teaching has been a blessing to you. God bless.